So we're waiting for quorum. We'll give it a couple extra minutes. Good afternoon. I'd like to call February 7th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting call to order at 5:35.
Good afternoon. Item number 2, establishment of quorum. Andrew Arroyos, absent. Enrique Cisneros,
Here.
David Estrada,
Here.
Julie Dominguez.
Here.
We have a quorum with 3 commissioners present, 1 absent. Item number 3, notice to the public, open forum. Lisbeth, do we have anyone that would like to speak? No? Item number 4, consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
I'll second it.
I have a motion made by Enrique Cisneros, David Estrada to approve, and second by Julie Dominguez. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstains? Motion carried. Regular agenda discussion and action. Item number 5, consider and take action on the proposed approval of final subdivision plan for Socorro Logistics Commercial Unit Number 1, located at North Loop and Inglewood, being a portion of track 13A, 13A, 2B, and all tracks 14A and 14F, Block 5, Socorro Grant, Socorro, Texas. Mr. Botello?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Item number 5 on the agenda is the Socorro Logistics Commercial Unit 1 Final Plat. The summary of request is for approval of Socorro Logistics Commercial Unit Number 1 Final Plat. A little background on this plat. It's currently zoned ICMUD, which is Industrial Commercial Mixed-Use Development. The size of the area is 8.4 acres. It's situated on North Loop and Inglewood. The future land use map is commercial. The proposed land use map is also commercial. And the request is to approve the final plat. Plat shows 6 commercial lots, 1 public right-of-way, and 1 private pond. There are no changes from the preliminary plat, which was approved by City Council on December 1st of 2022. And so the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning staff is for approval. Next, you'll see the location map showing the area close to North Loop and Inglewood. The zoning map shows the designation, which is ICMUD in purple. And a few pictures of the property, as well as an aerial image showing the lot. This is a preliminary plat. And the final plat, and after that we see the final plat, which is in a larger scale to show more detail. And then we have the master plan phasing. You'll see the area in the bold black rectangle. And to conclude, the summary of the request is for approval of the Socorro Logistics Commercial Unit 1 final plat. Do I have any questions? You guys have any questions?
Can you put the slide with the black border? Can you put it back up there? I'm thinking, isn't this like more of an L shape along Nuevo Hueco Tanks Boulevard? Does it come around and does it have frontage along Nuevo Hueco Tanks Boulevard?
No, I believe it does not. No, sir.
Mr. Estrada, Carlos Gainar for the record. So I think that so this is what Mr. Botello was highlighting is that parcel in purple.
Just the parcel in purple?
Yeah, that one right there. So that parcel in purple contains the 6 lots
Okay.
and the pond, and then a little portion of, what's the name of the street? That extension? Socorro Logistics Court, which would intersect with North Loop. The other one that you're talking about is an L shape, and that is Valle Nuevo Commercial. And
That includes all the commercial frontage against North Loop and
Yes,
Nuevo
sir.
Hueco Tanks?
Correct.
Okay.
This would be behind it
They're behind it.
on North Loop, yes, sir.
And that little gray rectangle in the purple is the pond, I want to assume? Or is that one a part of the property areas? Or- I could barely see, I could barely make it out.
What's the question, Ms. Dominguez?
Is that the pond, the little gray area?
Yes,
Right
correct.
in the corner?
Yep.
Uh-huh,
Right there.
okay.
And then also, just to clarify, the pond is part of a different subdivision, but they are adding capacity to that pond through this plat. So they will be increasing the capacity of that pond, and there's the notes and the dedications all outlined in the final plat. But, so that's the pond that we're referring to.
Part of what subdivision? The one?
Can you just?
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. Jorge Grajeda with CA Group for the record. Yeah, so that pond is part of the Valle Nuevo commercial development. So as part of this particular development, we are dedicating about 35 feet just to add a little bit more capacity for those commercial lots that would be, draining into that pond. And then we do have a private pond that'll be privately maintained right at the corner of North Loop Drive and Logistics Center Court by that intersection to make sure that there's no runoff going into North Loop Drive.
And that private pond is not part of this?
Yes, that private pond is also part of this particular plat. It's in the north, southwest corner,
Is there
or
any-
northwest corner if you're looking at it in
Can-
this particular
Can
map.
you point at it with a cursor by any chance?
Can you go back to the previous slide that shows the lots? There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, there you go.
So that, so this right here, this particular area, this is the private pond.
Okay,
And then we are dedicating a little portion here of additional right-of-way dedication towards this existing
okay,
pond that was part of the final commercial.
okay.
And these are all commercial lots.
Commercial lots.
That's the blue area, correct?
Right, the gray area is, as you're seeing, is this particular
Okay.
And so by private pond, you mean the pond is the responsibility of the owners of these lots? Or who's responsible for maintaining that pond?
So the additional right-of-way dedication that we're showing here is to provide just that adequate capacity for these lots that are abutting marketplace. And then this particular plat is going to extend Logistics Center Court all the way to North Loop Drive.
Okay.
And then to pick up this street runoff, we're building this private pond that will be privately maintained.
And who's responsible for maintaining the private pond? The owner of the entire subdivision, or the parcels, or, because
Right, it would be the owner, and they'll have some type of agreement with these lots for this to be privately maintained.
Is the private pond attached to any of the other lots as far as like land-wise, like ownership? Or it's a separate lot dedicated as a pond?
Yeah, it's a separate lot, because it's bisected by the Juan de Vergara and, logistics there.
Jorge, can I ask a follow-up question? So are the lots going to be sold or leased?
So the lots are gonna be sold, but there's gonna be an agreement on maintaining of this private.
Got it, okay. And so, Mr. Estrada, just so you know, we wouldn't accept it, so that's why it stays private, right? So the plat would have dedicated the pond to the city of Socorro. When the plat is dedicated and signed off at the county, at that point then, whatever parks, streets, ponds would then be the responsibility of the city of Socorro. In this case, we're not taking ownership of it. We're not, it's not being dedicated to us, so that's how it's maintained privately.
So what happens if it's not maintained?
Just like any other lot in the city of Socorro, right? You grow weeds, code enforcement goes out there, issues a citation to the owner of record. You have 10 days to comply. If you don't comply, there's a notice of violation, and we would take it in that regard.
That's interesting.
Okay, well. Any question? I'm good.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion made by Enrique Cisneros to approve, second by David Estrada. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstains? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Item number 9, Planning and Zoning Commissioners Report.
That's planning and zoning. Well, I had I guess comments on the meeting we attended. First of all, thank you for inviting us up in Horizon.
Yes, sir.
And I guess clarification, I have a question, and that's going on what the speaker was saying, discussing variances. And he made a comment that just stuck to me where he said that the zoning board should not be, I guess, voting on variances, that should go to the zoning board of adjustments. But I guess I'm asking for clarification there. Maybe I didn't hear him properly, but can you comment on what he was talking
So I
about?
don't remember specifically what he was referring to, but I could just sort of generalize, and then if Marwan's on the line, if he could maybe chime in. So my understanding is that the zoning board of adjustments looks at variances after they have been, I guess the word is violated, right? So again, zoning board of adjustments looks at is front porches or porches that have been built without the variance of the setback, or the most common one is accessory structures, where the applicant didn't come in and code enforcement goes out there, they issue the citation, and then it's after the fact. So that's the differentiation being Board of Adjustment looks at variances after the fact, if you will. Planning and zoning looks at zoning variances prior to enactment, right? They're as part of the entitlement process. I was there for about half of it, so I don't remember him specific. I don't, if there's a comment that he made, I don't remember myself being there.
Okay. Did anyone else catch that comment, or?
I did. So what I was looking for, or what I want to report and request from Mr. Body and our legal team is that during the presentation, the presenter made it sound like, okay, this is how we avoid litigation. This is how we save ourselves from liability. And the way that we do that is if everybody's on the same page, from city manager to city council, down to planning and zoning, and we come up with a plan and we stick to it, which in a sense we do have that future land use plan, right? And it's available to everybody on the website. You all printed it for me, which is great. Where it kind of sounded like there was a distinction between how they do it and they advise Horizon, and kind of what I've seen in practice is that when there's changes or deviation from that plan, that it, to the way that they do it and the way that they advise Horizon, is that supposed to be done in Board of Adjustments, not in Planning and Zoning. That's kind of the distinction that I saw from that class. The other thing was the uniformity of, hey, as nominated and appointed commissioners by City Council, the dream would be is that the City Council member that appointed us gives us an idea of this is what I ran on, this is how I represent the city, and this is how I would vote on it, and plan on voting on it when these issues come to City Council. Not specifically for one issue, but in accordance with variances, in accordance to what the future land use is. So one, I want to make some distinctions. There's one, some tangible requests. One is, how do we, and I don't know how much litigation we've been exposed to. So one is, if we can get some training or some background from our legal team to one, get a sense of how much litigation we've been exposed to, what that brought it on, what was the end result, and how do we make sure that that doesn't happen in the future. The second thing that I think is tangible and we can measure on is, where do we, and I understand that's their legal team advising Horizon. How do we compare that in the city of Socorro? Because they were advising to do all that in Board of Adjustments when we do it in Planning and Zoning. So that's the second thing. How do we compare those two? And legally, how do we lower how do we mitigate that risk to legislate or litigation? Third, which again, great class, thank you, it was incredible, and I enjoyed it a lot. The third thing would be, once we do get a sense of those two answers, or kind of what the status is moving forward, how do we, as an appointed by City Council commission, work together with our City Council to get a sense of what they want from us, and then us as commissioners to decide, hey, that's outside of what I want to do as a commissioner, or that is, or I am your guy or your gal, or I'm not your guy or your gal, and I shouldn't be.
Yeah.
If my thinking is, and I think that what's best for my city is differently, then I shouldn't be your guy or gal. So I think it was great. I think that it was a great class, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to take stock of what they're doing, how we're kind of comparing that. And it's not going to be apples to apples because we're a different entity and a different legal team. But I think it's a great opportunity to look what we're doing, mitigate the litigation exposure, and how do we move forward from this?
Yes, sir. Marwan, I have some comments to Mr. Cisneros' question, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond maybe I have some comments regarding the second portion of the connection between P&Z and City Council, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to his comments and questions, if you can, on the liability issue and the sort of the first part of his comments.
Yeah, so, okay, there were several comments made there, so let me try to address them. So, the question on, I guess, briefing you guys on all the litigation that the city of Socorro has had. Honestly, I mean, unless city council authorizes it and the city manager, it's most likely not to happen. The reason being is a lot of the litigation, most of it, if it ever goes to city council, it goes to actually executive session. There's certain statutes that require actually that it be done in executive session. Some of the things are, there's the legal interest of the city, and sometimes for instance, current lawsuits. My law firm is the outside counsel for the city. There's current litigation. We can't, in the middle of it, put it out in the open because it does not benefit the city of Socorro to put it out there, especially in the middle of litigation, because it can actually harm the city. and that's not something you can put publicly. Now, P and Z Commission, sometimes we can go into executive session. I think it's been a while, but if there's something that touchy, that involves a legal issue, and that's where sometimes I've mentioned in the past, like, well, you guys can request we can go to executive session. I'll kind of usually hint that that's what we need to do, and then we can talk about that. But yeah, I mean, briefing all the past history of litigation, that's probably somewhat problematic. I mean, there are things that can't necessarily now, certain things can be divulged on the Open Records Act, those sorts of things. But as far as like legal strategy or why the city did something or did not something, all cases are filed in public open court, right? So you can go through the county's website and see, okay, what lawsuits have been filed. But some of the things, like attorneys, when we give advice to the city, it's privileged. I can't go around the town telling people what I told the city, and the city can reveal that it's internal litigation strategy, but again, it hurts hurts the city. An example I'll give you is if you're a private client and you came into my law firm and hired me, you tell me your personal secrets, you've been sued, I would be breaching my ethical duties to go report what you told me all around town, post it on Facebook, something like that. So attorneys are bound by that unless their client authorizes the release of that information. And so the city is actually, other than the Open Records Act, and there's actually many exceptions for those, there's a whole department of things that come into cities of court. Every time there's open records requests, it's reviewed by the legal team. And even then, certain items can be held back under the law for different reasons. So, that's kind of my response to that. I think that's unlikely to happen. Now, when we get into troublesome spots, when an issue comes up, like I said, if I've seen something that warrants it, I'll usually say we need to go into executive session on that. But, lately I don't think anything has risen to that level. A lot of things, we as legal counsel coordinate with Carlos and the other members of the planning zoning department, city manager ahead of time before items come up. If there's an issue, you'll see sometimes an item may be removed from the agenda. It wasn't posted properly, or there's an issue with notices going out. And so there's legal work, there's legal, like you said, if there's a legal issue with something that can end up in litigation, those are reviewed. But because sometimes we're in the middle of those things, the city is not necessarily going to put it out there, because you're inviting actually litigation by putting it out there that something was, screwed up or something. There's an opportunity a lot of times to resolve things by you repost it, something like that. So I think that's kind of my take on that issue. As far as the coordination between planning and zoning and city council, it's a good idea. I mean, that's best practices, and it's good to have a cohesive, team-like approach on those things. On the attorney side, I would tell you, we don't venture into that because I don't get into the policy issues on how things are decided and how the city should run. I'll tell you this, that the city manager, city mayor, city council does not take direction from me. I don't tell them what to do. We serve at the leisure of the city, and so we provide legal counsel, but when it starts stepping into, public policy or what I think they should do, even with you all on the Planning Zoning Commission, I don't give my opinion with whether something should be, approved or not approved or disapproved. That's really for you guys, and I can't influence that decision either. So, I'm very careful on that. I can't influence your policy making. But whether your policy making should be aligned with city council, yeah, I mean, it's good to be on the same page and to be aware of it. But, that's something, again, that I can't step into and tell city council members what they need to do their job. I can't tell the mayor. They're elected by the people, and so, it's inappropriate for me to do that. But I'm just explaining this my legal side. I think Carlos can tell you on the planning zoning side.
Yeah. Hey, Marwan, I think the other more specific request from Mr. Cisneros was to see if we could get a briefing on the difference between variances that go to BOA versus variances that go to planning and zoning. Is that correct?
Yes. The other thing is.
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry.
Yeah, the other thing is, maybe it doesn't have to be specific law case that we've gone through, but based on the training that we had, they kept giving us examples of this is why you want a uniformity, so that you're not open to that kind of litigation. So, and that kind of goes to why we want some more clarification, because what we got from the class is a little bit different than what we're getting today. But again, that's why I think it's such a good opportunity to kind of look at this now.
Yes, sir. I could also speak to the item of the coordination, right? So there's a couple of things that I'll mention. One, what I do remember him saying, and this is not only him saying it, but this I know to be true, is that when it comes to subdivision plats, you have no discretion. You have to approve it if it meets state code and if it meets our remember the city's ordinance needs to reflect what the local government code allows us to do. You can't deviate. Again, the question of the ponding, right? If it meets the code, if it's within the Texas local government code, I can't disapprove it. You can't disapprove it. City council can't disapprove it. It's actually, you don't have a choice. You have to approve it. In many instances, like for example, some municipalities don't even take their plats to planning and zoning or city council. It's approved by staff because again, if staff's reviewed it, if staff has reviewed it and it meets code, it's done. City of Socorro, like City of Socorro chooses to take it to P&Z, which I think is okay, and it chooses to take it to City Council, which I think is okay. May be redundant, but again, it is what it is. City of El Paso only takes plats to planning and zoning. That's where they end. They don't think, unless it's changed, right? But it hasn't. So they don't go to City Council because it's almost a waste of time. You're just putting something on the agenda that they have to approve. On zoning, you do have more discretion, right? On zoning variances, rezonings, you do have a little bit more discretion. That is where I think you've heard me say that there's a little bit of, at least from our staff's perspective, that we've tried to do over the past year and a half or so, is, hey, listen, you want a rezoning? Great, makes sense, but we want to add a little bit of landscaping or the detailed site plan, which isn't required. Let us know exactly what you're going to build, so it's easier for staff to make the case on your behalf to P&Z and City Council. Right? You don't have to approve rezoning cases. As a matter of fact, there's been the one in Horn you did, and there was no recommendation. The other thing too that I would add, Mr. Cisneros, is I think that in my estimation, the Planning and Zoning Commission should be non-political. Right? Unlike City Council, that is a political body. And so in my estimation, or if you're asking, and maybe you're not, but I'm going to tell you anyways, I think planning and zoning should be non-political. And so you should try to make your decisions based not on whoever's at the dais and is going to threaten to vote or not vote for you, right? You don't have that, unlike City Council. And so that's why we even from our perspective, right, we should also be as professional as we possibly can. I think we have been, where we don't make decisions based on emotion or the person that's sitting in front of us. I think staff has recognized that over the past year and a half, that if the code does not allow it, it doesn't allow it. And here's our recommendation for why we think, our recommendation to you for why we think you should rezone or shouldn't rezone. Different from what City Council, right? City Council does have the political pressures of, whether good or bad, that's not for me to say, does have the political pressures of constituents and the number of people that show up to this auditorium or this council chambers. And they do have discretion whether they choose to vote for political reasons or practical land use planning, best practices reasons, right?
Absolutely.
That's what I would add.
No, absolutely. More than anything, I think what they were concentrating on is really not allowing any variances, is what was my takeaway from that meeting. But again, that's where I think it'd be good to get some clarification, because my takeaway from that training was, here's the master plan. As good or as bad a situation is, as political or not political the presenter is, that is set aside from either allowing or not allowing the variance. And I think as a commission and as a city, we've struggled with variances. And that was one of my biggest takeaways from the meeting, that they were saying, no, if everybody's in alignment, here's the future land use, and you stick to it, but that was what they were teaching, right?
Yeah.
And it's not what we've been doing, where we've approved some variances, some we haven't. But again, I think that's what's great about the class, that we're not asking for clarification when we're in trouble or when there's a serious situation. It's like, hey, we got this class, we got this other viewpoint. I think it's a great opportunity to dig deeper into it.
That's right.
Do we go with that class or kind of get an understanding of why we're doing it differently? Does that make sense? At least that was my takeaway from the meeting.
Can I add to that?
Hmm?
So now the only thing that I would add is that the world is in black and white, and the city of Socorro is in black and white. So there are some instances where you do need variances, right? A lot homes that were built prior to platting, and here's a plat, and the home doesn't meet the setback, right? So again, we've presented those to you. I think and maybe this is where Marwan could chime in, I think as long as we're following the legal process of how you get to the variance, then we are not breaking the law. We're presenting it to you. It's in a public hearing. It's documented. It's on the plat. It's recorded on the plat. It goes to the county. 50 years from now, someone can read, right? It wasn't done just arbitrarily. Carlos Gallinar, here's your variance, right? That's breaking the law.
No.
So I would, and I know that's not what you're suggesting,
Yeah.
but I would just. It makes me a little bit nervous when I hear you say things like we shouldn't be approving variances. Well,
No.
sometimes you're going to have to, right? And
Yes.
that's okay. That's just the city of Socorro. Unlike Horizon, which is newer, the city of Socorro has acequias and arroyos and landlocked properties and properties that are built 200 years, 150 years ago, and lots that are weird and lots that are,
Weird.
That's right.
And I'm not saying we're doing anything illegal. I think that's where my takeaway was, that in that training, the way that the city of Horizon, the way that they define the class was, try not to move out of that. And what I'm trying to say is, well, let's take advantage of this opportunity to say, well, this is why we're doing it differently. Because I think that, at least for me, I was just kind of surprised with, holy crap, they're doing it very differently than what we are. And the way that they presented the classes, well, you don't want to deviate too much from the plan, because then it opens you up for litigation. I don't know if that's the case, but that was my takeaway from the class. But
Yes, sir.
But it was a great class.
Yes, sir.
And I enjoyed
That's
it.
right.
Thank you please invite me back.
I could jump in here real quick, just a couple comments. Yeah, so I didn't see the training, so I'm not sure I went, but one of the things that when we say things about policy, like, okay, well, we shouldn't be, approving things or disapproving things. One of the biggest things, think like a court, and a judge. The judge can't make a determination until he's heard a case. He needs to hear the facts and then approve it or deny it, even though he might be thinking a certain way. I'll tell you that years ago I started as a prosecutor, and I would have a judge start the hearing and say, this guy's guilty. I'm giving him the maximum. But you guys go ahead and do what you're going to say. And in those cases, those convictions they would get overturned. And sometimes we'd have to remind the judge, you can't say it out loud. And that's one of the things here, is that there might be a policy of staying within certain limits, like we want to stick with the master plan. Yeah, absolutely, there's that policy issue, but you can never, and sometimes, the few times I remember going in executive session here with planning and zoning, again, it's been several months. For instance, we had certain bigger developers that come over and over again in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. If you ever make statements like, oh, I know this guy and I've seen him before and I don't trust him, and you may not, but I wouldn't say it out loud. And that's when I usually say, you guys need to go to executive session. It's like, look, you can deny it or you can approve it. But when you say those things, that's actually the kind of things that invites litigation, when you made a predetermination. And the person then can say, I didn't get a fair hearing. Again, I'll tell you that legal actually reviews things after the fact, even after it goes through P&Z commission. I will tell you that there was something even as recently as this November or December that we had to review that went to city council, and something kind of had to be corrected on that issue. And maybe, it might have been a reposting, or it had nothing to do with actually P&Z, but certain people weren't heard, or they didn't get to speak at city council, and so we had to, well, let's do a redo. We'll hear it again. And I think I've always told you guys that as well, is that, you know, let somebody speak, you know, we can hold them. It was the very last meeting we actually talked about, there's a minute limitation. But my thought is always let people speak, let them get their, you know, say their piece, and then make a determination. So yeah, that's one of the things that you don't want to say out loud, kind of what you're thinking before, you know, because that's kind of, that's where you could put your foot in your mouth and say the wrong thing. So, you know, especially with showing bias for or against certain applicants, that's always the biggest problem. You want the process always to be fair. But yeah, that's a policy issue on whether or not we should deviate from the master plan. Like Mr. Gallinar said, that it could be a case where variances are warranted, and based on the demographics or something different, the geography or something else like that. It could be very well be that 100% of the variances that come in this year should all be granted. It could also be the opposite. None of them should be granted. But that's why you're given that power as a neutral body to make those decisions. City council is really not supposed to influence you. You know, you're supposed to be making up your own mind, and that's why we have a two-step process. You guys make a determination, you're an advisory body, and then it goes to city council. They independently make their own decisions on things. I don't tell them what to do, Mr. Gallinar doesn't tell them what to do, but they do look at the recommendation for P&Z, and then they accept it. They don't go with it sometimes. But you know, I think the planning, I mean, the training is helpful in knowing that, look, you do want to keep continuity and uniformity on certain kinds of decisions. But yeah, I mean, to let you guys know, if something really ever gets out of bounds, you know, we do try to catch that. If on the plats, items like that, and usually there hasn't been that issue, but you know, I've been with the Planning Zone Commission, it's probably been 3 years at least, 3 or 4 years. There was previous members where we would have issues with requiring all sorts of different things not required under the ordinances for a preliminary plat or final plat. Well, we want you to do X, Y, and Z. And it was kind of like negotiating on behalf of the city. And you can't make people jump through extra hoops, even though you think it's a good idea. The law doesn't require it. And to be honest, I mean, you know, these developers and everything, they've gone to Austin and gotten the laws changed in the last few years to make it more favorable for developers. I mean, that's the reality of things, is the people that have the money to kind of influence the decision-making in Austin on the laws. And so a lot of them felt like they weren't getting a fair shake in towns all across Texas, little cities and stuff. And so they changed it to put these time limits on preliminary plats, final plats. And so you have to actually even articulate if you deny a final plat. Why did you deny it? And you need to put it in writing. And so, you know, it's been a while since we've had that issue. I think even before Carlos's time, I don't think we've gotten there. But we try to prevent that. If we see something like that, I mean, that's why recommendations from from planning and zoning, they vet it. They've looked at the ordinances. If they have issues, they go through legal. So anyway, I know I'm being long-winded about this, but you know, that's my take on it. So.
Well, thank you. That actually gives me a lot of clarification, because I've always been an advocate for planning and zoning, that we do negotiate from a completely different point than planning and zoning as employees, city council as having to negotiate with votes and popularity, and us as local homeowners and business owners in Socorro, that we do negotiate from a different point. But in the classic, it sounded different, right? Or at least that was my takeaway. So that clarification helps me a ton. The other thing that I kind of wanted also to kind of look at is, in the training they had said that these types of changes that should happen at Board of Adjustments, but that's what they had said. And so I
Yeah, we'll clarify that one item, Marwan. So I'll email you or call you during the week. Again, I wasn't there, but I think the gist of the comment was that all variances, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he said all variances go to BOA, not P and Z, right?
It was something like that, and then that they were much more strict, and that the reason I came to mind again is because Mr. Body mentioned that Board of Adjustments acts like judges, right? And I'm paraphrasing, of course, but something to that effect. And again, I'm not advocating that we have to do what they're doing. I'm just saying, well, I had these questions about what role do we play as a commission in planning and zoning, and then do these things continue to come through us, or do they go to Board of Adjustments? And I feel fulfilled in bringing it to your attention, and you guys let us know where we go from there.
If I could, and I'll make this real quick, 2 points on that, on the question on planning, zoning, and Board of Adjustments. One thing, and maybe some of you guys know this, but the city has had a hard time finding volunteers for a lot of the boards. Board of Adjustments, we almost had a quorum, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, has not met in a year plus. There was some kind of backlog on certain things. So that's been an issue. So if it can go to planning and zoning legally, it'll go to planning and zoning currently, so that the city's business can still get done. But that's been a problem. Number two is the ordinances for every city are different. And recently I actually looked at something at Horizon, had something to do with their fireworks issues, or their ordinances, different from ours. And we looked at it. I'll be honest, sometimes we look at other cities and find mistakes in their ordinances, and they don't necessarily apply. So that I would caution that sometimes that what worked for one city doesn't work for the other, and also the population size. So, and I don't know Horizon's particular ordinances, but Socorro on certain items, planning and zoning and Board of Adjustments, the way it's written, has dual authority. I think Carlos kind of better stated it though, that the things that come beforehand go through planning and zoning. That's why it's planning and zoning. Preliminary plats, final plats, 100% of those go to planning and zoning. Board of Adjustments, like Carlos said, is after the fact. So some of it depends on how the ordinances are written. Ours, there's a little bit of flexibility on some of the things. Some of them there's not. So I don't know how theirs is written. So it's not always apples to apples, but that's a couple things I thought.
Very good. Anybody else?
This is Commissioner's report.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to apologize to everybody. There's no excuse. I just fell behind, and my apologies.
All good, Mr. Chair.
For the record, Mr. Arroyo's arrived at 6:08. Item number 10, Planning and Zoning Department report.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I do have several items. One, we didn't forget about the accessory structure item. I know you had asked us last meeting regarding, it came about with the gentleman that asked for the variance for the over 50%. So we didn't put it on the agenda because City Council also had an item last Thursday. And so we wanted to wait to see what direction City Council also gave us. And so we wouldn't have been time to draft or craft something for your review by Tuesday or by Friday afternoon when the agenda needed to be posted. But we will bring back something to you on the next meeting. I think it has to be introduced and then voted on, but we'll double check that, and then, or maybe not, because it's just a recommendation that goes on to City Council. Anyhow, so didn't forget, we'll bring that language to you as you had asked us to. And then number two, I had wanted to let you know that we started, TxDOT has started the feasibility study for the expansion of North Loop. Staff met with TxDOT last Friday, had a great conversation. They're in sort of the initial phases of that plan. For your benefit and the public's benefit, whomever is listening, TxDOT will be having a public meeting on Tuesday, February 28th from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. here at this location, at this room, to get public input on the feasibility study for the expansion of North Loop from Horizon to, is it FM 1110?
Clint?
Yes, right? So essentially Socorro, Clint, San Elizario, portion of North Loop. So wanted to bring that to your attention.
What time?
Yes, sir. It's a Tuesday, February 28th, from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Thanks, sir.
And then one final item, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, wanted to let you know that I will be stepping down from my position as city planner. My last day in the job will be February 28th. I have been offered and accepted a job with a private consulting firm out of San Antonio. Will still be in El Paso, and wanted to take this opportunity to thank you. You know, it's not anything that I was sort of actively searching for, right? I mean, I love my job. I love the people I work with. I think we've come a long way in the past year and a half. And certainly had a lot to look forward to over the next at least year or 2 years. In my mind, I say, you know, I'll take it year by year. But this is an opportunity that has been presented to me, and it's sort of a really great opportunity that it's one of those things you can't say no to, right? So just wanted to let you know I'll have one more meeting the next time we meet, and then officially last day will be February 28th. Had a conversation with Ms. Rodarte and our staff, and it's sort of a bittersweet kind of sentiment, right? But I'm not going anywhere. I'll still be in El Paso. I'll still be in the region, and so please let me know if I could be of service to you in any different capacity.
Congratulations on
Thank you so much.
your job.
Congratulations.
Sorry to see. that-
Yeah.
Who,
You've been a great asset.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really appreciate that.
who will be stepping in?
You know,
your
so
place?
the position has been posted. Hopefully there'll be some good candidates. I know there's been some interest from several people. And again, you know, I get it. As a director, I step away. But, I mean, you have a great staff, right? You have great qualified people that do a great job and care deeply about the work they do and care deeply about this community. So you'll be fine. You'll be okay.
Wishing you well.
Thank you so much.
Item number 11, consider and take action on the adjournment of this meeting. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion made by Julie Dominguez, second by David Estrada, to adjourn meeting. And all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstain? Motion carried. Meeting adjourned at 6:21. Thank you.